This is Roger, Mudfossil University. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite people in history is Emmanuel Velikovsky and some of his theories. Now he did research in all different fields. Wasn't just a historian. He was also doing research with gravity, anti-gravity, and so forth. And he realized that gravity is electromagnetic forces. Now, this is my hero. Emmanuel Velikovsky was destroyed by academics. He is my hero. He had a book that was written which is all about ancient past, which verifies exactly the things I'm saying about giants and everything else. He wrote about this in 1950, and he was destroyed by academics. He had a book that was on the bestseller list 11 weeks in a row. They forced him to take it off of the bookshelves because he was not saying the things they wanted him to say. Then everybody attacked him, including Carl Sagan, and all of the people we hold dear attacked him, and they were very, very, very wrong. And I will prove every word he said was correct. And let's start with this right now. This is gravitation. He understood it. Einstein had no clue whatsoever. Now this is what he has to say. He claims it's a magnetic force. We'll go over his theory. You can read his theories. But some of the evidence he presented is what I'm going to use to show that he's absolutely correct. Now, I say that ether is the cause of everything, and ether is a magnetic force. It's negative particles that are totally in the universe. Everywhere you go, there's negative particles. They are light. They are light. They're the things that are sent out from every luminous source, and they permeate the entire universe. Nobody can dispute that. They think it's nothing. It's just a electromagnetic wave of nothing that goes exact same speed. All this nonsense. Absolute, total misunderstanding of everything based on Einstein's theories. And that we have to get away from. His theories claim that the speed of light cannot go any faster. Well, now the planets are going faster than the speed of light because we have good telescopes. It's because this light is slowing down. It has nothing to do with the planets speeding up. Light slows down as it moves towards us. That's as simple as that. Now, what Velikovsky said is this. Look, they couldn't understand this for hundreds of years. All right? It's been known now for 2.5 centuries there are more or less daily variations in the height of the barometer. Now, 1664 they noticed this, and had been puzzled over at every station on Earth that keeps records were kept and studied without success in finding an answer. Speaking of the diurnal and semiurnal, the daily and partial daily variations, Lord Riley says the relative magnitude of the latter, as observed at most parts of the Earth's surface, is still a mystery of all the attempted explanations being illusory. They can't figure this out, and they still can't figure it out. Well, they can't figure it out because they can't understand ether. Now, one maximum is 10 a.m., the other is 10 p.m. The minimums are 4 a.m. and 4 p.m. It's when the sun is the Earth is turned into the ether. That's what it is. Every time the Earth turns into the ether, and I'll show you little diagrams. All right, this is the thing you really have to understand to be able to understand why we're plowing into the ether when we're facing the sun. We're behind the sun. We're not rotating around the sun like this. We're behind the sun trying to catch up to the sun. So as our planet rotates in this direction, at 12 o'clock, we're facing towards the ether. It's just the way it works. At 12 o'clock, we're always facing towards the ether. We're not on the other side of the sun facing away from the ether. At 12 o'clock, we're still always trying to catch up to the sun. All right, and it's 12 o'clock, and in the next hour, it's still 12 o'clock as the Earth turns. We're continuously, the 12 o'clock noon hour, continuously spins this way, trying to look towards the sun, which is in the direction of the oncoming ether. That's why the barometric pressure is very high at that particular time of the day, and it's very low on the offset times. It's no question whatsoever that pulsation is from this interaction. In my mind, no question whatsoever. You can question it, but I'd like to see what your answer is. Now, taking it one step further, we are the solar system spinning like this, moving towards well, being dragged, really, being ripped through the fabric of space, which is the ether, meaning that we're being cascaded into this barrier, this ocean of ether. Now, it will not always be consistent. It will be varying barriers of ether. So the more dense the ether is in one region, the more intense the scrubbing effect of our planets and our sun and the moon and everything passing through it. It's just a more thick medium. It's the medium of the galaxy, of the universe. It is everywhere. And there's more of it where there's more luminosity. Now, we are whipping through here just a zillion miles an hour, and this is just wrenching everything forward. And as it does, it literally crushes the matter into itself, into this black hole. And I believe there is a black hole there. I will go along with that. And I believe that black hole is the product of mass being so restricted and constricted that it now takes on a positive attraction, and anything that has negatives is pulled in extremely fast and will not escape, and everything has negatives because all light is negatives and all mass is coated with negatives. So that is when this becomes extremely positive, that everything is attracted. It's the end of the story. And everything is attracted to all other positives, and all nucleus has an extreme positive attraction. It has an excessive positive attraction. So that's why anything with a negative is pulled to everything else that has a positive. And all that means matter is pulled to matter because they're complete. They both have electrons, they both have positives, so the electrons pull to the positives of each. They come together. The electrons that are floating in the universe are all negatives too. So they go to anybody that has a positive, and that is anything that is complete matter. When they do, they bang into it. When they bang into it, they shake it and create heat, or bounce off something and create a little bit of light. That's how that works. And we're being dragged through here, rubbing against that ether. The ether is everywhere. We're scraping against it, and it's folding our arms in and wrenching the inside of our galaxy like that, although that's not our galaxy. Okay, this is a toy that explains physics better than anybody I've ever seen. Now, this is Latham's Crazy Machines. That is a nucleus. What it has is an extreme central core of positiveness, surrounded and crushed in by negativeness, which still the positive still exceeds the negative and does this. See what you just saw? That's a negative electron. This is a nucleus, which is an extreme positive surrounded by negatives. It attracts the negative, but the negatives keep the negative at bay. There is an excessive negativeness that will be drawn to this extreme positive, and at some point the positive still has overriding authority and keeps more electrons that still want to be here to get to this positive, because it's still exhibiting positiveness in a region that surrounds it, in an exact region. That's why these will stay in that exact region. And one will pile here, and next one will go here, and next one will go here, and next one will go here, and they will all stay exactly a region apart from each other. And it'll be like a cloud surrounding that nucleus. And those electrons will be tried to get invaded by other electrons, and the invasion will be heat. Right now there is no invasion. Everybody's happy. We're sitting around taking it easy, maybe walking around slowly. But all of a sudden we're going to start getting invaded by electrons. Here they come. What's going on? Oh man, there's people banging into us and slapping us around. And this, again, this is a full cloud of electrons. And when they flood in here, or you smack that, or you do whatever you do to it, it could create magnetic fields coming into it. They start to get excited. That's heat. That's what we're seeing now, is heat. Now, at some point, they will become so excited, they will cascade away, and at that point, it is light. But they try to hold on very, very, there it goes, that was light. All right, there's the ether. All these little dots, that's ether. What's happening here is it's a pulse red laser impacting with molecules and regions of, I'm calling these magnetic regions. Every single particle that's coming forward here, crashing through this ether, wants to own a piece of property this big around, and it's saying, get out of my way. And when it does, it illuminates them. That is what light is. I cannot at this time give you the reason why this illumination occurs, but I do know its impact. It's like a bubble to a bubble, and when they impact, they force each other, and it just glows. That's what's going on. Now, that's why these are glowing, because they are compressed. Literally, that's what's happening. So that's our light coming through the air. Now I'm going to try to do this quickly so that you don't have to stay too long in this. All right, that is the same light disk. Now it's compressing because it's hitting a venturi, which is a restriction, which forces everybody to come into each other's regions. That's what's going on. Then they start to glow. They say, well, you're not supposed to be with me. Get away. They cannot get away. They have to proceed through this venturi, which is 2 metal pins or 3 metal pins if it's a double slit. And as it comes through, it particulates and atomizes and crushes and chaos and absolute total craziness going on. Complete plasma. Everybody's in each other's regions. There's no magnetic fields that are of any visible. You wouldn't see any magnetic fields here. Okay, let's start with that. Now, so where do you get the magnetic fields from? They radiate around the source of the interaction, which is the crushing of everything. All right, because they're sending out waves and saying, get away from me. And it creates these huge patterns, which normally they're not quite so big. But this is intense. Now, as it comes out of here, they're still in each other's regions. They still do not present magnetic fields. They now begin to take on these filaments as particles spinning. And I can show you that spin, and I will right now. That's in the blue trail. Okay, now, as that, we saw that a white spin. Well, you couldn't see them spinning there, but as they came out of that accelerator, they came out in that cone shape, and then they started to come down these little tiny filaments. These are the filaments. These have not yet presented fields. This is what I'm saying. I could be wrong. People should be doing this research to find out. Rodney Warren did these light pictures. He's had a fabulous discovery of this venturi. I used it to do my atomic research, and I think that everything he presents, I understand. Now, this is that section before they present fields, and that is the particle spinning to the right-hand rule, drifting to the left. That's how it works. They came out expanded because they are accelerated. They are now compacting because they are entering space which has the ether in it, which is opposing this. Before they were all compressed, high energy. Now they are now back into an unrestricted space, and bam, they are hitting, and instantly, boop, they'll fluff up into a magnetic field. And that is what they call the Higgs. Well, they call it the Higgs field. And that is, well, right here. Well, we saw the light suck through the venturi. This is right above the venturi. This is how the chaos comes out. It starts to step down. Here, there's nothing. There's nothing wrong. It's just all gobbly. And then it does this, and then it starts to step down into the spinning disks again. And then there's a distance in here that we see as those white fibers, and they are that spinning particle. Then as that approaches further, it comes out this way towards us, and these are the little tiny filaments, if you can see that, and these are the Higgs fields. Poof, they pop up on the front of these fields, of these filaments, as they begin to slow down. Now you'll notice there's different colors here, and you'll notice there's different, like this one's nice and big and round, and this and big and round, that one's being squished. Well, the fields are interacting with each other. This is being compressed in amongst these other fields. and they're twisting and crushing and causing that to excite and to present a higher colored frequency, which is into the violet. These are into the orange and red. Now, that particular particle is, I believe, spinning backwards. It shows no magnetic field whatsoever. These are all, the magnetic field is inside that, right there in the magnetic particle, which is what they call a charged particle carrier. Right? That's what a boson is. A charged means it has a charge on it. Particle, which means it's something coming through there, a particle, and it carries the field. The field is the Higgs field. The reason we see all the little tiny dots and these circles are so magnificently perfect is because of the magnetic charged particle presenting a crushing effect with its negative spinning, creating all negatives around it to become polarized into these fields. And at a certain point, it stops to affect the ether. There you see, it's like there's a very strong cutoff point, it looks. This one being reverse spinning. So they're all supposed to spin to the right. They're all supposed to spin to the right. If it spins to the left, it's just like Venus. It's overheated. It has no magnetic field. And it impacted one of these. And then I saw something that I really have a hard time completely understanding. And it is this mini disc. Now, I looked at this a lot. And the more I looked at it, the more I got confused. No, not really. These fields are coming through here. We saw these fields. Now, these are fields. They're not particles. The particle is right in the center. You're never ever going to see that. Never going to see that. Because it's so tiny, but the field that surrounds it is huge. So, what are we seeing here? We're seeing the charged fields that surround the charged particle carrier. What is this one? That one is the white one that we saw, the high energy reverse spinner. There's no field here. You don't see any field. It's just, it's a much higher energy than the other stuff. But it does have some form of a field. And I looked at this many times over, and it still confuses me. But I think I started to understand. I think this is like an anti-field. And I think it's sucking field back. You see how this is dark? Right next to there? You see how it's dark right next to there? I'm just guessing right now because that's all I can do is guess. But I'm seeing dark next to there. It's like, give me a little of that. Give me a little of that. And all of a sudden you start to see another presentation of a field. And then this. Now, this I don't know what to think about. Whether or not it is a particle, it is this particle, let's say, which was spinning backwards. Now maybe it clipped into here and now it's bounced and spinning forward. I have no idea, to be perfectly honest. But they don't seem to present any kind of a field like this when they spin backwards. They just have energy, and it's extreme energy. And you know, Venus is like that. It's spinning backwards, and it's almost our sister planet. It's almost identical to the Earth in size and so forth. But it's 800, almost 900 degrees at the equator because it's spinning backwards through the ether and rubbing the hell out of the equator. And at the poles, it's minus 250 degrees. What it's doing is it's sucking the electrons from the poles out. And that's all heat is. That's all cold is electrons leaving faster than they can be replaced. You start to go into a cold condition. If you suck them out of there so fast, it will get freezing as hell. And it goes minus 250 degrees. But at the pole, it's over 800 degrees, almost 900 degrees. It's sucking the electrons right out of the poles and drifting them right off into space from Venus. That's what's happening there. It's rubbing those electrons right off the surface like sanding it. Hotter than hell at the poles, cold as it can be at the equator. I mean I'm sorry, backwards. Hotter than hell at the equator. which is obvious, just scrubbing hard there, and that's the presentation against the ether. And because it's ripping those electrons out, they're coming out from the poles. All right, that's why you have extreme minus temperatures on the poles. Now, this I don't really understand. I have to be honest with you. I'm sort of trying to get a feeling for it, but somebody else is going to have to do some more of this research, because this is all I have, and I don't have time to do all. Rod did this, and we spent over a year working together on this, and it was all him doing the pictures. I did all the atomic part of it. He had some other work he was doing using his pictures, but I was just sort of watching what he was doing, really, to be perfectly honest with you, and coming up with my own ideas about the atomic part. Rod has a whole other thing that should be investigated, but it's so hard to put any real solid proof of what he's seeing. But you're seeing things, and he's seeing things. The other people have all kind of theories that have no proof whatsoever. And oh yeah, there must be a wormhole. Yeah, it's got to be this, got to be that. Well, no. Look and see. Look what's in your eyes, and that's what we're showing. And they won't look. They'd rather guess. Oh no, you can't look at this stuff because Einstein wouldn't have believed this. Well, I don't believe what Einstein said. How about that? All right, so this here, I don't know what that is, but it's not the size of, at this point, one of these. So I'm saying this is either a portion of one of these, or it will expand to be one of these, or you can make your own decision. But I'm seeing what I'm seeing. You have to look at. We need to get other people to do this research. Very simple to see these pictures. Very, very, very simple. Rod would shoot them to me sometimes 20, 30, 40 pictures a day. And I'm talking for a year. I mean, the guy was just absolutely phenomenally productive. And should be known for this, what he came up with. Because this is the only way that anybody's ever going to understand how light works. You have to be able to see it. And we can see this now. Okay, to sum it up, I'm saying that we saw ether in the first shots where we could see those little illuminated white particles. I'm saying that light came through that venturi and was accelerated into this white Cherenkov radiation. We could see that with our own eyes. I'm saying that these little tiny filaments have now bumped up into these little pillows of magnetic particles. We can see that with our eyes. We can see the distortion of this disk being forced in between the other disks. We know they react to each other, and we know they excite and create a higher frequency of energy when they interact and compress. We can see that with our eyes. We can see with our own eyes that that is white and has no magnetic field, and I believe it's spinning in reverse, and we saw what happened when it impacted with the other fields. Whether it's a negative energy field, I don't know. Research needs to be done. We have seen that with our own eyes. Okay, this is my attempt to show what electrons look like and what complete matter looks like and how they interact with each other. Now, it's more or less of a Wile E. Coyote type of thing, but it's the best I can do with what I have. Now, these are electrons, okay? In the center, that's an electron. Let's call it an electron. All right? They have a field that surrounds it, which it wants to own. It wants to own that. So they stay away from each other in space because they are negative. They push away from each other. They stay at a distance. John Glenn said they stayed 7 to 8 feet apart. That's exactly his statement. Now, and these are electrons. And these are not really glowing. They're sort of cold when they're just sort of laying around, not interacting with each other. Now, what happens when they start getting hot and light gets produced? They crush their fields together. Like that's the two of these forcing together. They begin to glow. I cannot tell you the mechanism for that. I do not know. However, they glow, and sometimes there will be so many in a region that one of them will get thrown off, and it will speed off into the atmosphere or into wherever it goes, and then it will collide with something to become light again. And it's always a lesser light than what what was forced into here. They pick up a region in it's a quantum region, and it shoots it out, and that's how they can actually identify what molecules are what. But these are just electrons. Now we get into the complete matter. All right. These are nucleuses in the center here. These are not electrons. The things out here are the electrons. They also want to own orbits. So they're out here saying, I'm going to stay here. You stay over there. This guy's going to stay here. This guy's going to stay over here. This guy's going to stay here. And before long, it sets a pattern up. I mean, instantaneously sets the pattern up. But that's the pattern I'm showing in the pictures from Rodney. Now, what happens in matter is they interact with each other. They say, you know, I could use an electron. Do you have an extra electron? It's like go fish. Yeah, I got an electron. Yeah, okay. Well, I need it. Well, what do you got to give up? Well, I got this, and I can give it to this guy. And then he'll give you one of these, and you give me one of those. I'll give you two of these, and before long, everybody's working together, and you have a chunk of matter. All right? Now, what you want to remember, though, is that matter is coated with electrons. There will be nothing. Electrons are going to be every single where around every single thing. There is never going to be anything that the nucleus is going to pop out of the electrons. They're not surrounded in rings. They're surrounded like a ball. So that thing is in the center of the ball. It's like a balloon wrapping around it, just the way it is. And then you force these balloons together, they will try to bounce apart. That's the nature of electrons, and the nature of the nuclear particle is that there is no neutrons. There never was any neutrons. The nuclear particle is positives flooded with these little tiny particles. And because they are so attractive, these particles crush in these fields that they normally would never ever crush. But they do crush when they come up against the positives. That's why you have such a tremendous amount of internal energy here. These are already crushed like this into here. They're just crushed in there. And then, because there's so many of them crushed against the positive, they begin to repel additional negatives. And that's how they set them up in these orbits. Now, that means that internal core is just hot as a firecracker. It just wants to go off. All right? I mean, they're holding them so solid. I mean, it doesn't want to go off. Let me put it that way. I know it doesn't want to go off. It's so solidly locked in. That's the gluons and the hard nuclear force and all these things they're talking about. That's what keeps these things together. Now, to split them, it gives off energy. Now, I'm sort of working on these things, the splitting and the adding together, fission and fusion and so forth. There's energies that come and go. And there's a lot to know about that now, because now it's a different story. If you're going away from neutrons, what is actually happening? Whole different story. You got to start over from scratch again. Everything I'm saying, if you accept one word of what I have said, then you have to accept that we have to start from the scratch again. As far as a nuclear fusion, fission, I have no clue about any of that stuff. I am a simple-minded person. That's why I can see these things. I have a very simple mind. That's just a fact. Now, I like to solve little tiny mysteries, and then they turn into big solutions, really. Now, I mean, I love this guy, Velikovsky. He looked at what he solved this. Tell me how this happened. What about this? What about that? Exactly what I do. Listen to this. Unaccounted for fluctuations in the lunar mean motion were calculated from the records of lunar eclipses many centuries and modern observations. These fluctuations studied by Newcomb, who wrote, I regard these fluctuations as the most enigmatic phenomena presented by the celestial motions, being so difficult to account for by the action of any known causes, we cannot but suspect them to arise from some action in nature hitherto unknown. They are not explainable by the forces of gravitation which emanate from the sun and the planets. Again, it was found that the strength of radio reception was nearly doubled with the passing of the moon from overhead to underneath the observer. it does not appear reasonable that the relatively small gravitational tide in the Earth's atmosphere, would double this kind of stuff. Something else is going on. The lifting of the ionosphere generally results in better radio reception. Velikovsky looked at every single detail. These are all points here. The change in the angular velocity of comets, meteors after entering terrestrial. This is the kind of work that really needs to be done. Not, oh, we saw this happen, that solves everything, it's all over. We can write enough black spooky things to cover it. That's what happened. You have to prove every single word of every single statement that you make. And that's what Velikovsky did, and that's what I do. I don't make statements I can't support with something. If you looked at what I showed, well, and you have a question about it, I'll be glad to explain what my thinking is. I might be wrong, but I do have a rationale for presenting what I present. All right, so I think that ether is absolutely 100% certain. It was known since long ago, in the first days of antiquity, when the people could barely write, they knew there was ether. So it's time to learn how to write again. All of these interactions are very well explained by the ether rubbing against the equatorial areas, creating massive displays of bands of this and that, heat, and the polar regions are somewhat different. Venus is going backwards to Earth. Earth is spinning the normal way. Venus is going backwards, crushing itself, just really like sanding itself against. So it's supposed to go with the ether, and that gives it a nice flow. When it goes against the ether, it boils the surface, and the surface of Venus is almost 900 degrees, but at the poles it's minus 250, because as it is crushing through and ripping all of the electrons off the surface, they have to come from somewhere. They're coming out of the poles, dragged down through the surface and out. And that, anytime you drag electrons out of something, that creates cold. It's just as simple as that. You force electrons in, you have heat. You pull electrons out, you have cold. Case closed. 900 degrees at the equator, minus 250 at the poles. Rubbed off from the equator, pulled in from the poles. Heated up at the equator, scrubbing in backwards. It all makes sense once you take into account the ether, and everything has to be taken. It all has to start over again, because not one single word is correct once you understand that there's nothing but ether there. Everything is coated with electrons. Einstein said that stuff came out of the sun, there was nothing, absolutely nothing. Photon has no mass whatsoever. Well, his own equation says if a photon, which is energy, has no mass, it has no energy. Right? E equals mc squared. If there is no m, there is no E. Case closed. Light has no energy, if you believe Einstein. His own equation. Absolutely nonsensical. And it's been, and that created the disaster that we've lived over for the last 100 years. Hubble was restricted by that, so he came up with some nonsense. Everybody else comes up with nonsense because they're trying to fit it into nonsense. All right? That's all I have to say. It's just the way it is. Come up to Mudfossil University, where there is no nonsense. We disregard nonsense with every single electron floating through our bodies. And if you look here at light is ether from stars and fills space, you will see exactly what it is, because it's seen. It's seen. It's not something that we can't see. John Glenn saw it. He talked about it. They're little ones. They're 7 or 8 feet apart. They're going 4 miles slower than me. They're going all around my capsule. They're brilliant. They're lit up like little stars. It happened just after I came into sunlight. An exact same thing they said in the Tether incident. The exact same thing. So come up here and look at these things. Here's the Tether incident. Exact same thing. Coming into sunlight. Oh boy, Claude, what am I going to do about all this stuff floating around in here, these light particles? Well, maybe I can get them out of here, ground control. No, you can't, Claude. All right, that's the case. Time to look at things the way things truly are. This is the ionosphere. What do they think ions are? Ions are negative particles, or they could be positive particles if they're hydrogen ions, but that's very rare. Okay, today I will leave it at that, my good friends. This is Mudfossil University, the citadel of truth, a veritable oasis in the desert. Now, we are growing fast, 32,225 today. We've been putting on 100 or more a day at least. Now, come up here, roam around. Roam around. Some of these are very short, some are a little longer. All of them are very reasonable and viable and truthful. And if you have any questions, certainly ask them, and we'll be glad to do what I can. And all I can say is keep an open mind. Don't suppress people that come with things that you don't understand the second you see them. I have a lot of research that I've done, and I have presented things that I've researched for 6 years. Have DNA, CAT scans, and anatomists, which are the mud fossils. I present them, and within 10 seconds, they're disputed and dismissed from someone who feels that they have a superior knowledge over anyone else because they read a book that somebody else wrote, and that gives them the authority to tell other people they're wrong. So it's time to dismiss that way of thinking, as I have, and do your own looking, because what you are being told is someone told somebody this and told somebody that, and before long somebody's coming up with some real fancy explanation that has no proof whatsoever, and everybody loves it. That's what happened to our good friend Mr. Einstein. All right, and it's been a terrible destruction of science for over 100 years. If you want to assault me for assaulting Einstein, good for you.